Good evening and welcome to Unerased, Reclaiming the Future of Africana. Tonight's program was organized and curated by the students of the Africana Research and Methods course and was developed to explore the current state of Africana studies, a field that studies Afro-descended people from all over the world. The current political climate has become a growing concern among students, educators, and community organizations in this field. Today, educational institutions across the nation confront intensified pressures to minimize or sanitize the study of Black life history and memory. We believe that our responsibility to protect the field is more urgent than ever. Tonight, we have brought together a collection of critical voices from within the Academy and our diverse communities to understand what it's like to navigate this field and obstacles that are faced, as well as hearing from those on the ground. And we hope that these perspectives will show those who make up and contribute to Africana that they are actively resisting and will not be forgotten. We would like to thank our co-sponsors and supporters, the Department of Africana Studies, the Clement A. Price Institute, Dominican Talks, and the Black Organization of Students. Thank you for supporting this important work and standing in solidarity with us as we resist the erasure of Africana studies. If you guys would like to scan the QR code in front of the room for Q&A questions, that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you for coming.
Good evening, folks. Glad to have you all here. Welcome to Unerased, Reclaiming the Future of Africana panel, panel one, I might say, and their resumes, I should say, have been posted, and we're not going to go through all of that on the time's sake. So we have Dr. Davis, who is the Africana chair here at Rutgers in Newark. We have Malachi David, not Davis, excuse me, David. And he is the president of BOSS, the Black Organization of Students here on campus. And of course, we have Professor John Keene, who is here at Rutgers as well. Former chair, okay. And so I'm gonna get right to it so we have some time and maybe you guys can delve into these questions a little deeper. I'm gonna start with you, Dr. Davis. This whole, it may have been in the works before, but it seems like this whole attack on Africana studies, I'm speaking nationally, Black studies all seem to blow up out of, as a response to Nicole Hannah-Jones's 1619 project. And I'd like to know, why do you think that is, or if you think that is? And also, what are some of the greatest challenges you face as the chair of a department in a field that's facing scrutiny nationally?
I know. Do you want to go first? So the first part of the question, I partly agree with the premise that the 1619 project was a catalyst of the attack on Africana studies or Black studies. But if you look from a historical perspective, there have always been attacks on it. And I think that that's an important part for us to consider, not only thinking about how we weather this storm, because I'm going to call it a storm, but that we have weathered many storms, beginning from the 1920s, beginning from the 19th century, right, onward in terms of the field. So in terms of giving me hope and strength and inspiration from those struggles of people who built Africana studies, Black studies, and for some people it's not the same thing, but there's a intersection between both of them as we have gone in a global direction. So I think that the way that we weather the storm, the first of all, is just to remember the history. That the people who have created Africana studies and people of African descent, black people in general, have faced myriad of challenges throughout their history, and we stand on their shoulders. I mean, that's in and of itself is inspirational. And we're now at a point in which we can rely on global networks to help us meet some of the goals we want to achieve. The second part of your question, or the third part of your question, deals with the attacks and the current attacks. What I tell students right now is this is precisely why everyone should be taking Africana studies classes and black studies classes. This is exactly why, because we understand this moment. I'm not, when people say that it's being erased, I think we have to modify that to say that there's an attempt. It can't be erased. Part of the idea is that it is so prevalent, it is so enmeshed in U.S. history, Brazilian history, Caribbean history. This is where we have to go in and say, this is the moment where we can understand why some of the issues that are happening, particularly with this particular administration, they're happening because of the history of the achievements of some of what Africana studies has brought us to. That's kind of vague and general if you have a more specific question, but I can delve into it. But maybe you have other questions for other panelists,
Yes,
right?
I do.
Okay.
Oh, without a doubt.
Okay, yes.
Yes, I do. And I'm going to move on to Malachi. And Malachi, I guess the question for you is, what are the challenges of running this type of organization in the midst of our current political climate?
I would at least like to say one of the challenges is building community, seeing where we start from, how to advocate on the ground, and then like how to build community. It's so hard to actually not just reach out, but just really engage with people who, I guess in this moment, they're not really aware they are currently being suppressed at this moment. And then on top of that, just coming up with, okay, if we want to build community, how do we build community? What are the steps to doing that? What about organizing? How do we really just gather troops together, at least on the ground, before, say, anything radical happens? How do we, say, I guess, feed the homeless? How do we go out and actually just give people the supplies that they need? How do we actually engage with our constituents on a broader level? Meaning, like, really that's it. Like, just to be around people in that space and to just gather troops and be like, hey, this is a problem that we're facing. Here's why we all should be worried about this, and why this matters to us is because of this. Like, so I guess one of the challenges will always just be building community. Like,
I'm not going to let you go that quick. I got another question for you, brother. You being a current student here at in Africana Studies, tell us a little bit about how the courses are enriching and impacting you personally, as well as strengthening the resolve to fight erasure.
oh, simple. Professor Robin Ince, Professor Holbrook, Professor Lacey Hunter, Christina, they all do a great job of just putting me out there, mainly just connecting me with opportunities, but also it broadened my experience because now I was able to take off I took an internship I studied racial and economic segregation within public school systems. So then from that point on, I now work in the Newark Board of Education, where I see how everything is affecting students currently. I see how they are disconnecting from higher education spaces. I see the student to counselor ratios. I see how they are, like, how implications on social structure and bias is also being put onto these students in a black body. So then it's just a matter of how do we actually protect these students? How do we get them in spaces where they actually know that they can succeed? It's just a matter of just empowering students, mentoring students, and then ultimately just helping them be purpose driven, but also at that point, something that I will always personally do, and I'm happy my classes did this for me, was really making my educational experience self-reflective, meaning giving me some type of strengthening my identity of who I am as a man, as a black man, and then as Malachi David, the person. So ultimately, like, I think my classes have always it always made me reflect back to who I was and ultimately why I want to do the stuff that I want to do. And I think Africana was great for that, and I will always be an advocate of Africana studies and in its many forms. Truth be told, I love it. I love the classes. It taught me like about some of the specific things I would personally like to fight against as well. So, and also it broadened my experience of just thought processes, social like thought processes, and I want to say that's it. Like I understand what I'm up against. I understand what I want to fight for. I understand who I want to fight for, and the work that it might have to come with eventually. And even now, as I continue to advocate on behalf of my students in the Newark public school system.
Thank you very, very much for that answer. We're going to move on to Professor Keene. And Professor Keene, as an author, educator, and researcher, what changes have you seen in people who are narrating our experiences as people of color? And then there's a second question. This one's kind of personal from being in your class. How do you see Afro-pessimism? Is it a detriment to our overall struggle for liberation? And if so, how do we combat it? There you go.
So I thought you gave the most difficult questions to them, but so first of all, I would say that over my lifetime I have seen a tremendous transformation in terms of how people narrate our lives, and a lot of this is a direct result of a series of movements, artistic, cultural, political, economic, social movements that have occurred since the we can go all the way back to the 1800s, but especially since the 19th century. And I've walked you last fall through the lead up to the Black Arts Movement, which I think had one of the most profound impacts on our understanding of how we talk about ourselves, how we see ourselves, how we value ourselves, but also thinking about early movements like the Harlem Renaissance, the Negritude movement, et cetera, and then going forward into thinking about the work that's being done today. I think most black artists, most black writers, most black creative people, most black narrators, right, have a sense of how the system works now, right? We understand, we understand, what the stakes are. Now, people, choose to take different routes. Some people are, of course, we're living in a very profoundly neoliberal moment, so people understand that, you can get ahead by becoming your own brand and kind of going, basically, we could call it vertical leadership and horizontal leadership. Going for vertical leadership and thinking, it's really about me and collecting as many coins as I have that I can get. But I think there are a lot of people, in the wake of all of the transformations over the last, especially, let's say, 50, 60, 70 years, are quite aware of the idea of horizontal leadership. It's not just about me and, getting ahead, but it's about basically the larger communities of which I'm a part, right? Especially when it comes to black communities, right? So that's one of the things I would say the changes I've seen happen. And I think, there are periods where we see kind of pullback, or as Professor Davis was saying, moments of crisis, moments of storms, where we see, kind of intense public pushback against, our attempts to tell our stories, to narrate our lives, to take control of our lives, to determine our future. But I think this is almost like a kind of oscillating pattern, and we have those dips, but then we have those moments, of course, as we saw just a few years ago, where there's intense, cross-class, cross-ethnic solidarity, and we see the society move forward, right? Even though we may have to take a few steps back. Okay, and your second question was, remind me your second question? Oh, Afro-pessimism, okay. So I'll just say this. I was at an event maybe a few weeks ago for the scholar Robert F. Reed Farr. He was giving the Kessel Lecture at the City University of New York. And after that, I was talking with a colleague who is based in Philadelphia. And he was bemoaning the fact that he thought, Black studies was becoming so institutional that it was trying to be like, traditional fields, right? Like philosophy or something, and, very, what's the right word? It was basically like, and he was, I think, in part talking about Afro-pessimism, critiquing Afro-pessimism without saying it, that it was becoming, so internally focused that it was not really looking at what was happening in the larger society, right? Now, I have a lot of thoughts about Afro-pessimism. On the one hand, I want to say that some of the most brilliant people working in Black studies today are writing in and around what we might think of as the concept of Afro-pessimism, right? And I think that they're in conversation with each other, but in many cases, they're also in conversation with kind of, we could say, the larger Black communities out there. In terms of thinking about how we go forward, just from what I can tell, right? I mean, so let me just say this. I think of a book like Frank Wilderson's, and I won't keep talking, but Frank Wilderson's, Afro-pessimism. And I feel like that is such an interesting book because it's a theoretical book, but it's also a biographical text, right? And in that text, he actually talks about, these moments of activism, right? I think it was the activism with the South African struggle against apartheid, et cetera. And I feel like in that regard, right, when we kind of step away from the really sort of high theorizing, there is something to be said for some of the points, some of the key points that Afro-pessimists are making. On the other hand, if you were to ask me, do I think one could take Afro-pessimism and use it to address some of the most pressing problems that are happening in Black America or across the Black world right now? I don't know. I don't know if that's possible, right? But then again, I'm not deeply grounded in Afro-pessimism. Last thing I will say is that I feel like a lot of times when we talk about Afro-pessimism, the emphasis is on the pessimism, right? And the emphasis is on, kind of some of the kind of key theoretical points, like the idea of social death, which comes from Orlando Patterson, the idea of the kind of permanence of enslavement, right? We're always at the status of a slave. The idea that comes, I think, from the brilliant Sylvia Wynter, right? The great theorist of, kind of how can we even talk about humanism, right, when we have never been considered fully human? So, I mean, these are some very, very interesting concepts, and I think, one of the things I would love to see maybe here is to have some of the top Afro-pessimists come and have people ask them questions about, can you talk about how this important theoretical work, right, which I will just say this I hope everyone understands this. This is considered to be some of the most exciting theory happening. So I know people in Asian American studies, indigenous studies, Latinx, Latinx studies, who are looking at Afro-pessimism and thinking, there are things we can learn from the kind of applications of these critical models, right? But I think it would be interesting to have a kind of dialogue or discussion, really dialogue, between people who are doing, let's say, working in the community and have pressing questions, and Afro-pessimism. Thank you.
Thank you much. And before I move on to Nathan, just very quickly, Professor, I remember in class, when we say Afro-pessimism, I kind of felt that we've always had it. It was just called the blues. but it seems like they wanted to relabel it, repackage it. And we're going to move on to Nathan. Oh, I got to ask you the question, don't I? Hold on, Nathan. That would help. Nathan, we know that you're big in advocacy, particularly for charter schools, and we wanted to know what was your introduction to Africana Black Studies, and how did receiving that support as a mentee at Great Oaks shape your continued support of advocacy? And I'm going to give you a segue into how do you think charter schools are doing as a job of integrating Black studies and Africana studies into their curriculum?
It's a great question to start off. I would say, well, first of all, good evening to everybody here. There's a lot of beautiful melanin and beautiful crowns in the room, so I'm grateful to be in this space. To your question, I'll say for my personal experience, I went to a charter school for, I believe, 6 to 7 years, and it wasn't until my senior year in high school that I took a class that was formerly Africana Studies or Black Studies, and that was the second year pilot program for the AP African American Studies course. And so it's something that is not necessarily a charter school specific curriculum. However, I will say that is what most directly opened my eyes to Africana Studies and its richness as a specific field of study, because growing up I had the experience that almost every Black child grew up with in learning about Black studies as a unit in history class, where we learned that Black people started in 1603 and everything since then has been slavery, oppression, and terrible, terrible things. I will say that my charter school and charter schools at large, to kind of blend your questions, my charter school and charter schools at large do a great job of anchoring themselves in the communities with which they serve. Traditional public schools do a good job of that sometimes, especially in a place like Newark, New Jersey. But charter schools have done an exceptional job of implementing what institutionally we would call DEI, but almost from the jump being integrated into their hiring practices and in their teaching practices and curriculum building. And so my charter school and the charter schools I saw, because they were serving such diverse populations, their teaching staff was extremely diverse and matched that of their students. I went to a school that had free tutoring as a part of the curriculum, supported by AmeriCorps and some federal programming and things of that nature. And so we had a diverse group of tutors and fellows from across the nation that many times were going into paths to teaching roles and administrative roles. And so before I knew the term Africana Studies, my schooling always reflected that. Africana Studies being the idea that your Blackness is something worth studying, something worth theorizing about, something worth articulating in an academic way, and that being put into every part of the curriculum and not just a history course or a social studies course. So I think charter schools have done a great job at doing that through their diversity in how they hire and how they govern themselves and things of that nature. I'll say charter schools on an institutional level and how they serve Black and brown populations. The model of the model of a public charter school is to, like I said a moment ago, to serve the communities with which they are, and the added freedom of governance that a public charter school has allows them to do that in a way that traditional public schools don't, because of some of the extra hoops that you have to jump through in order to change curriculum and in order to train teachers to actually implement Africana Studies or anything that is, I guess, a progressive curriculum piece into how you teach kids, how you implement like school spirit, things of that nature as well. I think my charter school did a great job of doing all of that. from taking that AP Africana Studies class to being able to do projects that were very specifically tailored to my blackness and my experience, to more frivolous, great childhood things. Like, I remember being taken on a field trip to see Black Panther on opening Friday, right? So I just, like, things like that. It made me feel like my blackness was appreciated, but not only appreciated, it was given to me in a way, it was shown to me in a way that this is not only something that you should hold and be wary of. This is not something that you should hold and protect from harm, but it is also something that you should hold and you should interrogate, you should research, you should analyze, and that you can learn from. And we can do that as a community.
Thank you. Thank you much. I got time. I'm going to squeeze in another question or two, and this one's going to go into you, Dr. Davis.
And you want me to be quick?
Yeah, well, it shouldn't take long, and it's just it's a personal question that I had listed, not the group. Brazil
Yes.
has the largest population of people of African descent outside of the continent. I was a grown man and then some before I ever knew that, and so I guess my question to you is, why do you think? Not that there isn't any connection, but first of all, the proximity, I realize that. Right. It's not around the corner, but do you see other reasons why we are not better connected, the African Americans here and the Afro-Brazilians?
No, that's a really great question in terms of if you want to go deeper into this, Modern Brazil is offered in the fall, which I teach. But I think that this is the question that has dogged people who study Brazil for a long time of why isn't this known? Because going back to your first question, for example, when you talk about the 1619 Project as the beginning of Africans in the United States, Brazil is 1500, so it's a whole century ahead. The Caribbean is 1494, and so when we look at Africana from a global perspective, we can be quite myopic sometimes living in the United States, and we have to be realistic of that. But at the same time, don't beat ourselves up. We have to be myopic sometimes because we're fighting for things in the society where we live, and so it is this curiosity of how do we balance the global with the local, and that's really a question that has many answers from different perspectives. But particularly because Portuguese is the language that's spoken. That's one of the reasons why if you chose to speak a second language in the United States, it would be probably Spanish, right? And so Portuguese becomes like the stepchild, and that would be a third language, which is really complicated for coming out of high school. The second part is that because of migration studies and diaspora studies, the people who move tend to be whiter and lighter skinned. And so the people that move to the United States or to Europe will tend to be not people who identify as black. If it were, then I think there would be more sort of dialogue between African Americans and black Brazilians, or people who identify as black, and which is another question about how we identify in different countries in terms of blackness, African descendant. Those issues become really complicated in terms of migration, and I think all of those reasons are a part of why Brazil is lesser known. However, sorry, I know I'll stop. This is the last one. Brazil is still a part of American history. In Equiano, for example, talks about his experience in Brazil, in the Caribbean, and in the United States. That's a part of his book. If you go into Boston, there were enslaved people who were brought to Boston from as far as Brazil. That exactly. So all of this is a part that has to be excavated, and it's a challenge because when you're focusing on your immediate, when you're focusing on redlining or your inability to go to school and you're focusing on segregation, yes, those are our cousins, right? But and we have to keep that in mind. But not all of us can do that, right?
Thank you so much. Are we going to take somebody? Give me the time. Are we going to take questions from the? We're at time. Yeah, 6:50. Oh, they're giving me 5 minutes. Okay, hold on. Yeah, I've got a question. Oh, okay. Okay. No, I cannot. Sure. I think yeah, we can. No, that's all right. Yes, ma'am.
Do you have any connections between Africana studies and African countries? Anywhere in Africa?
Yes, in fact, this is part of, this is another dimension in terms of this. Africana studies is a study of Africa and the diaspora, people in the diaspora. So I'm hesitating because presently the person that studied and taught Islam in Africa and African history is no longer with us. I mean, he's alive. He just is he's no longer with us. And so it is a critical part of Africana studies. That, I mean, the basis is Africana, and we're working on trying to promote that more. I believe Professor Holbrook also does African cultural retention. There's a whole debate about that. So yes, it is a part of. Yep.
But it's also about building partnerships.
Oh, that's what you want. Yes. So do you know of any specific partnerships that we have at the moment? I know we're working on. Gone to Kenya, to South Africa, to with Ghana too. Ghana as well. Yeah. Yes. Yep.
Anyone else? Come on, sir.
Excuse me, good evening. In the same vein that you were speaking notions to before, how is the department interacting with the K through 12 space? So you just referenced the course that's going to be taught in the fall that pertains to a topic that was part of that discussion. The gentleman here had spoken about your experiences coming through a charter school system or systems. How does the Africana Studies Department, if this even exists, extending its resources or making that type of connection into the P through or K through 12 space, which is essentially your feeding demographic, meaning graduating high school seniors if they go to college. Some of them might be coming in here, so that that aggregation of experiences that the gentleman had described earlier, that can continue, that can also be further clarified and honed, especially to the statement that the other gentleman had made about this notion of self and the centering of curriculum and things along that nature, in the sense of the historic nature of black studies and its connection to communities that it's surrounding. Does that exist, and what does that look like? If that makes any sense.
Do you want me to answer Well, I can just tell you from what happens from the Africana Studies, the perspective that we hosted primary and secondary school teachers last year. We were going to have, we're still waiting to see if this will happen, to bring students to campus so that's one initiative, and I forgot the name of the organization that did that. Again, this was done by a faculty member, through a faculty member who just left in the fall. So when that happens, we have to sort of regroup. But personally, one of my projects for last year was to go to at least 3 schools a semester. I went to one. And I think in the spring I'm invited to go to the school that's past the Ironbound in that direction. So we're thinking about ways in which we can continue to do that. I don't know if you have more examples.
No problem. Really quickly, I will say that I know that the Center for Pre-College Programs is a great partner of the university at large. And the dual enrollment program at Rutgers-Newark has a lot of courses, but I do know that I think Intro to Africana Studies is one course. I don't know if it's still offered, but I know when I was a senior, it was one of the courses that was offered to us that were accepted into the program. So I wasn't able to take it just because of the time conflict, but you know, classes that I were able to take, I took Intro to Sociology, I took Social Foundations and Urban Education. You know, so those are things that I know are on a surface level being offered to high school students within the city of Newark to be able to take college courses while they're still in high school. And so I would hope that that continues to expand so that, because I know there's a lot of schools in the city of Newark that are looking to expand programs like that to make sure that students are, one, getting college readiness and college experience, but also getting real grounded coursework like Africana Studies.
Okay. Got one more. Yep, I'm going to grab this young lady.
We also have one of our affiliate faculty, Professor Kim who works with all the schools
Yes.
in the state.
Oh, there she is. Yeah.
All of them.
Yeah,
And
that's
teaches history of African American education. Just want to shout that out.
okay.
I'll be quiet now.
I'm just going to grab this last question from the young lady in orange.
Yes, I'm very deeply appreciative of everyone's insight and expertise on this panel and explaining how Africana studies impacted your life as young people. I'm also very interested in the female perspective in terms of how Africana studies affects the woman of color, the black woman, the woman that's a part of the African diaspora. 'Cause I've never been a part of an Africana department, but I grew up in an era where you were able to go to many places to see free lectures of people that were deeply ingrained in Africana studies and African history. So that's a perspective I think historically is different now, but traditionally with people like bell hooks and everything, outside of that, it's not really discussed very much.
And I'm going to suggest that you hang around for the second panel because you're going to hear some ladies that are going to address just some of those questions you gave. And so, folks, I think we've run out of time for the first panel. Please hang around for the second. I was nervous starting off, guys. My name is James Evans. And as you can see, I'm the old man in the class, so it's good to be here. So we're going to break if you want to get some food, whatever, and then in a few minutes we'll come back with the second panel. All righty? Thank you again for coming. And thank you guys. Thank you so much.
So, hello everyone. I am your moderator for the second panel. My name is Destiny McCombs. I'm a third-year student here at Rutgers-Newark. My major is Africana Studies, and my minor is pre-health. Hello, everyone. So now we're going to go into our second panel, and it's called Africana in Professional Practice, and we're going to talk to some of our community leaders and organizers. And first, I'm going to start off. If I could have everyone please briefly introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Carolyn McCombs, and this is my beautiful niece, Destiny. And it's a pleasure to be here. It's like being home. I'm a graduate of Rutgers Graduate School of Management. Yeah. Also a graduate of Douglas College in New Brunswick, but my favorite place was Newark, so yeah. But also, I attended Avon Avenue School here in Newark, so I have deep roots here, and I really believe this was my training ground for the work that I do today, my foundation of being brought up in the city of Newark, but also attending Rutgers Newark campus. So it's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Robin Entz. I'm the Executive Director of the New York City of Learning Collaborative and a professor over in the Urban Education Department, and have the honor of being affiliated also with the Africana Studies Department. I did my undergrad at Spelman College, and I am really proud to be from a family of HBCU grads, so that is part of the heritage that I bring with me in everything that I do, and I'm pleased to be here. Thanks.
Nice. See, thank you for that. Thank you. My name is Simeon Marcellus. I am a professor of English. You know, I've been around. I'm on sabbatical. Yeah, it's good to see you. You know what I mean? Nah, I just took a shower. I just lotioned up. I'm a professor of English here. I am an Africana affiliate. I graduated from the MFA program at Rutgers-Newark. I'm also a member of Community Movement Builders Newark, a member of Newark Solidarity Coalition, and I'm the director of operations at Lamp Black, which is a mutual aid organization as well as a magazine devoted to Black literature, Black/Africana/African/ whatever you want to call yourself, literature, and I'm glad to be here
tonight. Good evening, everyone. My name is Mark Gomez-Sanyas. I am a son of the city. My family's been in the city for 3 generations, and my wife and I have raised our children in this city. I graduated from Rutgers-Newark in undergrad. I was a middle school teacher for several years, and served as the head of school and a principal of both a traditional public school and a public charter school. Currently, I am the executive director of My Brother's Keeper here in the city of Newark, working as a collective impact strategy to support boys and young men of color in the city.
Hello, my name is Loren. I am a senior here at Rutgers-Newark, major in Africana Studies, you know. But I'm also the CEO of L. Jones Embodiment. I focus on Black women's health, and I'm a licensed massage therapist. I'm a somatic practitioner. So I'm bringing these new holistic mindsets that are not really that new to our community, but my goal with my studies here is to integrate, this conversation between our health, our bodies, and our experience, and how, as we continue to fortify this information, how we can implement that in our healing journeys moving forward. So I'm excited to be here.
Okay, thank you everyone for those introductions. We're gonna start off the panel with Professor Ince. So our question for you is, how do you maintain a youth empowerment mindset in this time period?
Well, I would say the first is that my joy is I don't have to maintain it. It's what the focus of the whole work is about. We youth are the promise of the continued viability of our community. And so everything that I do is driven with an eye toward what is best for our people and what is best for the youth who get access to educational opportunities. And so I can't do the work without that. It's interesting, I was just meeting with a fellow colleague, and I was saying that as with NCLC and as the work that we do stands in the intersection of policies and programs and practices, that if it's not done with a first centering on the people, then none of it matters. Right? So I think of it sort of as a three-legged stool. If you have a stool that has a leg of policy, a leg of program, and a leg of practice, it's not held together unless you have the people that are focused. And so we can't do anything around education, we can't do anything around youth development if we're not centering it in the youth and understanding that every single youth is connected to an ecosystem that called family, but that family might show up in ways that the world might not expect and codify, right? So it might not be mom and dad, it might be auntie, it might be someone in the community who's taken, an eye toward the person, it might be someone in the barbershop. And so the only way you know how to do the right approach is by being in listening and honoring and respect of the people that we're called to serve. And in this particular case, as pertains to your question, it's the youth. But they drive the work. We're called to serve on behalf of the people. And the people have to tell us what they want, but we also have to come at a place with humility, and being open to hearing what it is their experience is, and then being in service to be able to be in support for where they need to go for their place of promise.
I love that answer. You don't have to maintain it, you always have it. I love that. Okay, my next question is for the lovely Reverend McCombs. My question is, has there been a monumental event in your organization, New Destiny, that has shaped your community?
Well, that's a loaded question. I'm executive director and founder of New Destiny Family Success Center in Patterson, where I've been serving for 20 plus years. But our focus is on strengthening families. And I've had so many pivotal points in my journey where it came from a place of passion. So for instance, we're a full service community school provider in a K through 8 school and in Eastside High School. Both of those things came about because I saw it's even beyond need, I saw the hunger for a nonprofit to come into the school and partner with principals and teachers and staff and to bring resources from outside. And it has been the most amazing journey in 14 years to see the impact we've had on the families, kids showing up with a backpack on Friday and we say, what's happening? My mom was just evicted. So we're right there on site to respond to that need and help that family get shelter right away. And that story repeats itself over and over in so many different ways. So I would say that all that I've been, let's just say inspired to do has come from a place of the heart, which is what is the need in this community? What is the need in this family? And so right now we're serving everyone from infants to seniors. So we're working with pregnant moms, reaching out to those African-American brown moms who are not connected with the hospitals because they don't feel welcome, they don't feel heard, and now we're surrounding them with all kinds of support, to the children in the school, to the seniors. We work with 6 public housing sites, so we're right on site in the seniors' facility, Montclair State School of Nursing, Hackensack School of Medicine, bringing those resources to the people with an ear for what is their need. So all of it comes from a place of the heart.
Thank you so much. I just want to say thank you for all that you're doing for Patterson and with the New Destiny Success Center. So my next question is for Mark. My question is, as an educator and a parent, what are some ways you combat erasure of Africana studies and the manipulation of Black history? As an educator and a parent, what are some ways you combat erasure of Africana studies and the manipulation of Black history?
I think the question makes me think about the Black and brown men I've had who are educators, and the way they understood their responsibility to me. As a young man growing up in this city, I'll give a quick example. My first Black male educator wasn't until I was a freshman in high school. And I said I was born and raised in this city. That educator, Mark Onion, was an English teacher, and I'm gonna date myself, but some of y'all just as old as me. 1995, there was a movie that came out called Higher Learning. For those younger ones of you, you should go watch it. It was one of those movies that came out and everybody went to go see it. And so it came out that weekend. We all went to Multiplex in Newark, in the East Ward. That Monday when we showed up to school, Mr. Onion decided that he was going to deviate from the curriculum, and he was going to dissect the message that we were supposed to get out of that movie. And I went to an all-boys school. It was 90% Black and brown. And, I mean, he just laid out. I went to the movie with my friends and my cousins for fun. But he made a decision that we had a responsibility to understand the message of that movie. And we thought we were just going for fun, but no. Like, we just had a greater responsibility than that. And so he dissected it. I mean, I remember it vividly. I remember him talking about Omar Epps. I'm sorry, spoiler alert, but it's an old movie. But, like, he talks about Omar Epps laying the dying body of Tyra Banks at the foot of Columbus's statue, and, like, what that meant and what it represented. And I remember that vividly because it changed the way I consumed everything from that day forward. The way I listened to music, the way I watched movies, the way I saw pictures, images, the conversations, the way I presented myself. And I tell that story because I think as an educator and also as a parent, I've tried to do the exact same thing. Sometimes to the bothering of my kids. They're like, all right, can I just enjoy this? But like, no, I need you to understand why and, like, where this comes from, what this means, what it means for you, what it means for us. And so I think that's one of the ways to make sure that just the stories and not, because I've seen this happen often where we highlight the deficits and the challenge and the oppression, but no, what my educators in my life and mentors have done is highlight the resilience, the grit, the power, the excellence. And so I've tried to do the same thing as an educator and as a parent.
Thank you for that answer. I similarly had parents and educators who would go the extra mile for me as well. Okay, my next question is for Professor Marsalis. My question is, how does your work as an educator in 2 departments inform your writing and your community organizing work?
Nice, thank you. I teach in creative writing. I also teach in the English department, and I'm an affiliate of Africana. I think the question actually is, it's flipped. It's like, how does community organizing influence my teaching methods? part of the reason I came to Newark was because of John Keene, actually, and John Keene's novel Counter Narratives. When I was choosing where I wanted to study to continue to be a creative writer, I had already put out a book called As Lies to Grin. That's about the erasure of a minstrel show performance they used to have every year at the University of Vermont. I was a basketball player at the University of Vermont, and every time I would go in the gym, it was like this eerie feeling. And then come to find out, when I was on campus, I'm going to date myself, but not that far back. In 2009 through 2013, they started to release this online archive of all of these pictures. I mean, very graphic pictures of white folks in blackface in this gym that I was performing in. So my mother's the former president of Westchester Alliance of Black Student Educators, the community I come from. My father's a jazz musician. My grandfather's a jazz musician. Blackness was just in the community as I was around. But I think around 2020, I started to organize more in my own community in New Rochelle. The police killed a young man named Kamal Flowers. Me, some of my peers who grew up with him, created an organization to help fight back against that injustice. Justice wasn't seen, of course. And then some of the students I went to Rutgers-Newark MFA with, black students, we started a community organization called Lamp Black. And it's a mutual aid program, $100 every other week to black writers. We started a magazine. We have a reading series. So I think it's really the organizing kind of came first, and then I was an adjunct professor, but then I became a full-time professor. And I think probably the organization that has had the most impact on me as an educator here has been Newark Solidarity Coalition. And for folks who don't know, Newark Solidarity Coalition was the group that I don't know, what do we do, hosted? I don't know what even to call it. We occupied the greens in front of the law school, fighting for justice for Palestine, as well as justice for families from Newark. I think these struggles, like each of these, groups, as much as it has been about identifying a black community, what the black community is, they've also been solidarity struggles. It's been, it's about seeing the intersections between my work in Africana, as well as my work in the wider world. I guess the last thing I'll say about all this is, like, I just think now about like a book project I'm working on now, where I've had to do research on the 1811 uprisings in Louisiana, particularly around New Orleans and the German coast, which is a history that, as a student, I don't think I knew about. I wasn't an Africana. I was a religion major. I wasn't an Africana major in undergrad. And I think now I'm just much more attuned to the ways that the black world in the U.S. has always been a diasporan world, that folks come from, growing up, I think it was this culture, black American culture felt very distinct, and it felt kind of impenetrable in a way that as I've gotten older through these studies, through life experience, I've realized that it's a part of a much larger struggle, an anti-imperialist struggle, an anti-capitalist struggle. And so I try to bring that to my kind of vision of being a professor in this century. Not only what can I do in the classroom to kind of help folks along to teach these lessons, but also how am I behaving in the community itself to reinforce the kind of goals of this struggle for black liberation that stretches back probably forever, but took root in academia in the 60s with the formation of Africana.
Thank you so much for that answer. I love that you flipped the question, and the community work inspires the work as an educator. Okay. My last question is for Loren. All right, it's kind of a loaded question. So your question is, how did you find your way to healing therapeutic practices, and what kind of things should we do now to work through the stress and anxiety of feeling erased in and outside of our communities?
Thank you for the baton. No play. It's funny, I feel like now my story is the inverse of his story, because my story starts right here on this campus, right? Being very curious about Africana my whole life. My teacher in the 12th grade told me, well, you know, Rutgers-Newark has a really great Africana studies program. And I was like, okay. So I applied and I got in, and my first teacher is Holbrook. And he just like tore the ceiling completely off. But as I got deeper into the knowledge, I started to become more curious about, you know, what lives underneath. And it kind of pushed me towards this journey of holistic healing. And eventually I ended up deciding to leave school and go pursue massage therapy. And then when I started to embark on that journey, I started to encounter these same conversations, but through a different lens, where my clients that were black men and black women, laying on my table, and as I'm working on them, you know, we're having discussions about microaggressions at work. We're noticing the tension that's being stored in the body, this anxiety that maybe we're not even aware of, right? This decontextualized tension that's living in our bodies and that's constantly existing all around us. So I started to get really curious, and I'm like, you know, what do we do with all of this? You know, you can't walk out of your door as a black person and not have some semblance of fear, whether it be from the people that are supposed to protect you, or maybe the conditions of your local community, or maybe the very air that you breathe. You know, there's threats on your life. And it pushed me deeper and deeper. And eventually I found somatic work, which lends its, you know, its understanding of trauma healing through the lens of the body. And so I stumbled on that work, and it led me all the way back to university. So I ended up coming back here. And I think that second part of the question of like, what do we do now, is a very loaded, and also it's a very diverse answer. Number one, there's a lot we're already doing, right? To hear all these beautiful people speak on the work that they're doing that comes from a lineage generations before them already says that we're doing something. I think that a lot of times we have this idea that, you know, black people, we don't do enough, we never stick together, but it's not true. A huge part of my beliefs and my, you know, ideas around healing are that we're constantly healing. You know, I think about our black grandmothers rocking in rocking chairs, and I think about where church was the only place that we can go, you know, on the plantation to have time for ourselves, and we're doing the boom clap, and we're doing the call and response, and in all of that, we're releasing, we're opening space, right? We're creating space for us to be something other than an object, right? We came to this country as quote unquote property. And so to think about how we're embedded in this country through a societal lens, through a institutional lens as property still, we have to fight back against that notion within our bodies. So ways that we cultivate that are the things that we love to do, right? Through music, through culture, through dance, through the practices that our people have always been doing and that are still doing in community. And most importantly is through self, right? How do we come back to ourselves and take that pause? How do we pull ourselves out of the institutionalized rat race and see ourselves as whole? We're constantly looking at ourselves as, you know, black people or as something other than human. Sometimes the healing comes back to what's it like to return to my most natural, most organic mechanisms. My breath, my aliveness, my connection to my people, right? It functions on so many levels, and in so many ways we get to integrate that work. So that would be my answer to that.
I love that answer, and I love that your journey is full circle. Like you had to leave university to find your passion, and then came back. I love that. So we're going to go into Q&A, but before Q&A, I do have a question for all of the panelists. If you could answer just briefly, what does healing look like in the communities each of you serve?
You do have to pause. But my experience is healing is being present and open and listening. Because what I found is that we're all in a struggle on some level. Some of us are struggling with basic survival. Others of us are just struggling to tap into the reality of living in this world. And what I found was sometimes people just need somebody to just be there present and not say a word and just embrace them.
As you were speaking, what came to me is together. That's what came to me. I think healing in the community that I partner with, I think it's togetherness. It is building of trust or rebuilding of trust. I don't think that you can have complete healing without the rebuilding of the trust, and to rebuild the trust requires to be in relationship with each other. So it all just, I think, goes back to together. And so what we're able to do through NCLC and in partnership with organizations like My Brother's Keeper Newark and so many other organizations is bring people together for those conversations. And sometimes just to be in the room with each other, just showing up to support each other. But I think that's where healing begins. A lot of people try to heal individually, but it's you have to do it together. You have to do it connected to source. You have to do it connected to others, and to be in community with each other, I think, is to be in the healing process.
That's beautiful. I was gonna say listening, because writers want to be heard a lot of the time, but thank you. You already covered listening. I'll say to be together, we need justice. Sometimes it's hard for us to get together when people in our communities haven't been treated justly. So there is a true togetherness, requires some amount of justice. I think that's what healing is.
I think I would double click on everything that was said. The other thing I think it's the second time I'm sharing this story actually in a similar forum. But Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris has a TED Talk that I highly, so you got homework now, you gotta go watch Higher Learning, and then you have to Google this TED Talk by Nadine Burke-Harris, who's a doctor who talks about adverse childhood experiences. And she tells this story where she says, imagine you're walking in the woods and you see a bear. You see this bear and things happen to your body physically. Your heart rate goes up, your palms get sweaty, right? Your adrenaline starts flowing. Like it goes into this state of kind of going into overdrive. And then she says, imagine that bear turns around and that bear walks away. And the further that bear gets, your body starts to kind of regulate and go back to its natural state. But then she poses this question, which is, what if that bear lives in your house? And I think the question was about in the work we do. And I think I've never described it this way until now, but maybe it's bear hunting. It's like, how do we get the bears out of our houses and out of our neighborhoods, right? And those bears are poverty and violence and
right? Like it's those things that make it really hard for you to be at peace. And so that's where my heart and my brain go when you ask that question.
Yeah, echoing everything that was said, I think a lot of what was said was on the terms of like resonance, right? Like being able to like be in connection with someone else's lived experience, with their story. I think that's how so many of us live and heal. But when I think about my specific community that I serve, I think about the fact that, you know, I'm amongst a lot of like people that call themselves healing practitioners, but are very educated in a very Eurocentric lens, right? And when I get into this work, I'm like, a lot of this stuff isn't yours. You know what I mean? A lot of this stuff has been ours. And so there's a lot of like decolonizing that I'm doing. And I think the word that's coming to me is, you know, reclamation and remembrance. Like it's huge to me. And I one of the terms that I hate that have become a thing in pop culture is like, we are not our ancestors. Like I hate when, you know, the younger generation sometimes wants to feel like we're so much bigger and badder than our ancestors and don't really think about how much they did and do, you know, continually, generationally, you know, to fortify us being here today still. You know, we have to accept that healing was being done. You know what I mean? We have to accept that, you know, resistance was happening. You know, that pushing back was a thing. And when we reclaim today, we have to see that. Like, we think we're learning new things. You know, we think we're creating new things. And sometimes we are, but a lot of it is remembering what already has been done, the path that has already been paved. And in that, we decolonize, right? Because we take this erasure, right, that has been, you know, presented to us for centuries now. And we push back against it by saying like, no, it's still here. You know, what my grandmother did is still in my flesh and bones. You know, what my ancestors fought for, I'm looking at in real time right now. So just holding on and honing into that remembrance to me is just, it's so important and it's so key.
Thank you for those wonderful answers. I believe we have time for a few questions. For Bonds.
I wanted to ask a question to Professor Marsalis on how the university's like lack of negotiation when it came to the encampment and its further choice to decamp us. How does that affect the way that you continue teaching or like the content that you choose to speak on in your work?
Thank you for that question. That's a really difficult question as well. I think like when you're in a particular struggle, you can lose sight of, and I don't want to use the language of war, but when you're in a particular struggle, you can lose sight of the future that you're trying to envision. And I think when I'm teaching, I'm aware that I am a person in a classroom. I'm aware that I'm a part of an institution that in a lot of ways I condemn as a part of what's wrong. You know, I believe in free education for everybody up through, you know, as far as you want to study. So there's a part of my lived reality as a teacher that is a contradiction that I struggled with before the university decided to decamp us and then not to follow through with any of the agreements they said they were going to follow through with, not to meet with the SJP students in New Brunswick. So that was a particular frustration. But as a black man in America, you know, for me to think that for me to think that that was the beginning of my dissatisfaction with my employer, or it would be the end, even if all 18 of our demands was granted, would be lunacy. So I think I'm lucky enough now to be on break from the university, but when I come back in the spring, I'm teaching literature of social protests. So, and of course, I'm always wary about how the university will try to co-opt the very real movements. So I'm sure I'll speak about that in class. But I also come from a jazz tradition, so there's a lot of improvisation. I haven't even started really thinking about the ways I'm going to navigate it. A lot of it will be discovered in the teaching and learning. So thank you for that question.
Thank you. Does anyone else have? Oh, you have a question.
I have a question for Loren. So first I was going to say, what do you think about this take? That's not really a take because I know the answer is yes. So twerking is therapeutic. It releases trauma, correct, right? Okay, that's it. So everyone should twerk a little bit more. Secondly, I'm not even joking. I'm being for real. But alcoholism and addiction is genetic, right? So how can Black Americans combat the stored trauma built into the community as a whole with things like that? Because, obviously you turn towards substances to help you during hard times. Some people use it to cope. So if Black people have been under such trials and tribulation, well, we are, and yes, we are. But Black people, as we are in America, under certain trials and tribulations, since it's so easy to turn to those things to cope. And like I said, it's genetic. It gets passed on from generation to generation. How do you think the community as a whole could help combat that? Oh, and then also I was going to say, if you have a quick group exercise you could do for all of us to release some tension right now, let us know.
Well, I'm going to have to write a dissertation now. No, I'm playing. Thank you for the question. I don't think that I will address the question on alcoholism because that's not my specific field of expertise, but I will say that, it's important to mention generational trauma. It's important to have these discussions because you're right? There is some cellular memory going on there, but it's also about our conditions, right? This is a systemic issue. It's not just, a Black people thing, right? It's when you're living in certain environments. And by the way, not all Black people live in the hood in proximity to a liquor store. But, just saying for those demographics and communities, right, this is a lot of it is a systemic situation, right? Poverty, lack of access to, resources, the school to prison pipeline, and just mass incarceration as a whole. All of these things are, kind of writing a story around the lives of Black people and how it is that you're able to move through your life, right? You have these influences not just because you're a Black person and there's history of this and that, but because our conditions are presenting us these tools. And so we have beautiful individuals like the ones here on this panel, many people here in this room that are fighting to push back and to be a resource, to be a face, and to institute, new institutions, right? And new places that, cultivate healing for Black people. But in a practice way, I think that it comes to us like resisting, right? Because we have to recognize these problems as systemic, and we have to start to say to ourselves, like, all right, there is one thing to kind of just follow and do what you see around you, but there's another thing to recognize that this thing is a tool and a weapon that's being used to kind of keep me on a loop. And how do I resist the things that are here to destroy me? Right? I think that's a question for anybody to ask themselves, but especially for us to do. And we do that in community as well, right? When you're looking around and you're seeing one thing, you need to find your people and you need to find safe spaces where you can exercise and practice something new. That's how we break, I call them generational practices more than curses, right? We have to choose. A practice is something that you do every day, right? It's something that you do consistently, and then it becomes routine. And then routine becomes something that's embedded in your cells, right? It becomes habit. And so in order for us to break habits and break these things that we see generationally, we have to start to practice new things. And that happens when we surround ourselves around those in community who are making an opening. We can't say this ain't cool, this is corny, and we also can't present it from a top-down, kind of mechanism. We can't present healing from this very educational and not educational, but y'all know what I'm trying to say. We can't give solutions to people if they're not on a certain level of understanding. We have to meet them where they are. And I think we're doing a great job at that as a community so far. So I don't know if anyone else wants to address anything a part of that question, but. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I think we might have time for one more question. Does anyone have a question? Oh, I was gonna say I don't think it'll stretch. Okay, yeah.
My question is to Professor Eric. Professor, most of my education from you actually came from outside of the classroom, from us spending hours on the phone schooling me about life outside of the classroom. So as an educator now myself, how do I take that with my babies, because I'm a preschool teacher now? How do I take that? I can't talk to them outside of the classroom. They're kids, but I want to take the strength that you gave me about policy and practice and then instill them while they're young. So that can be their daily different practice.
How old are they?
My education started when I was 3 and 4. My grandmother making me read these books. Even though I didn't understand what I was reading, she would, I had the practice of reading these books so it wasn't foreign to me. So I want to take them with my kids, but it's a bit too hard.
So you're standing in your answer, right? You're standing in your answer. Your grandmother read to you when you were 3 or 4, and you didn't really kind of know what was going on, but you just brought her forth right now, right? So you're standing in your answer. And I think for each of us is kind of what lifted up. I think we talk a lot about practices and things like that, but a lot of what we're doing is what was poured into us. We're pouring forth to others, and we're not necessarily waiting for permission to do so, right? So that would be my answer. What I was able to share with you was what you called forth from me because of your curiosity, because of your light, because of how you showed up in the room. It called forth more information from me. So I gave to you as I heard from you in that way. And then if you took it forward, you just came back and asked me for more. And I was able to respond to that because of a community of folks that I have access to, that at the time you asked me for an opportunity, it happened that, although I don't believe things happen for no reason, I believe they are gifts given to us by the Most High, I was able to give it to you. So I would say just read to the children. One thing that my son's dad used to do with him all the time are what I call Saturdays in the kitchen. And if there was anything that came on PBS that was black and white and had to do with, black solidarity movements or anything like that, it didn't matter how old our son was. He sat down at the TV, and he with his father watched and took in knowledge and information. And we've seen that show up in how he's pursued his life. So I would say if you see a light in the children, you should read books to them. You should affirm them. Anything that they are saying and they are doing, rather than taking it from a deficit-based perspective. So if it's a little kid who can't sit still, if it's a little kid keeps talking out of turn, then that young kid is demonstrating leadership. That young child is demonstrating initiative, and you want to honor that and then direct it in a way where it can be asset-based and affirming for him. Last story I'm going to say is when I used to commute into the city to go to work, I watched this mother answer every single question that her little 3-year-old answered on the train. It was early in the morning. It was a mother who was white, little boy who was white. She answered every single question. In the meantime, when I used to take my son into work, I would always shush him. Don't disturb people. Don't do. And watching that mom, I was like, wow, look at what I did to silence my son. What is it that we do to silence our children to keep them safe when we could actually try to exercise a little bit of the privilege of air that we have to honor the questions that they're answering? That right there is a difference. That little boy shows up as curious. Our little boys show up as disturbing the peace, right? How do we as mothers, aunties, abuelas, whatever, how do we show up in how we respond to the children, how we respond to the scholars who are in the room right now? These children, they're in here taking in information, and the fact that we're allowing them to be in this room says yet it's okay as early as possible to be in spaces that might not have, you might not qualify for, but you need to be in this room because they're scholars. So that's my long answer. Affirm them, give forth what your grandmother gave to you, and they will continue to raise.
That was awesome. I wanted to also just offer a resource to you. It's called Abriendo Puertas, Opening Doors. It's training parents as their child's first teacher. It is phenomenal. And basically, it's a curriculum that walks parents who don't even have to be literate through the process of how they transfer their culture, their love, their approach to life in everyday experiences. Going to the grocery store, and we even tell parents, take the book out. You don't even have to read. Pretend you're reading and read that book to your child, and that child is going to learn. And so that I'll be happy to share it with you. But it's an excellent resource. We've trained child care teachers with it and their parents with it. It's really awesome.
Thank you so much to our second panel. Can we all clap for them? Yes. And I would like to turn it over to Dr. Hunter.
All right, they gave me one job, and I'm going to do it and sit down. First, can we give my students a round of applause, please? They were nervous, and when I told them what my ambition was, they looked at me like I was crazy, like I was asking for cash in hand. And then they took it over, and I have not done anything but sit over there. So I appreciate y'all. Thank you for letting me be in community with you. Can we also thank all of the panelists who said yes immediately? All right, so I'm gonna let y'all go. Just wanted to say this has been the most incredible joy teaching this class, organizing it. I, like many of my comrades in the room, do not come from college-educated folks, but I come from a community dedicated to service, and this class was about service. Like, how do we apply what we learn in service to others, in service to the spaces that benefit us, even if they're not virtuous spaces. And they have just, man, y'all made me look really good. If I get any raises, I'm gonna have to give them portions of salaries. Or maybe many dinners, I don't know. You all will tell me. Anyways, have a very good night. I hope y'all take this joy with you. Please check out our department also. We are amazing. This is a department about service, as much as it is also about genius and shared genius. And we love our students, and they love us back. And they give us good things in return. So I'm gonna sit down, y'all. I said less than 2 minutes. It's 8:01. I'm sitting down now. Have a good night, everyone, and thank you for coming.